Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I understand that our time is cut short, so I will be brief and to the point. My name is Janti Yamiša. I work with FTI Consulting. Oh, it's up here. Great. And I'm here today to talk about attracting foreign direct investments into the Russian Federation, specifically for the purposes of building a tourism industry. So I think the first part of the conversation is to understand what we're actually dealing with when we talk about attracting investments. Equity investments in any market, specifically within the tourism industry, really take two shapes. One would be equity investments and non-equity investments. And really the way of thinking of this is whether there's cash or whether there are non-cash instruments that are being involved. The reason I make that distinction is because the forms that investments can take can finance different assets within the project, whether it's human capital in the form of better or improved management, technological developments or infrastructure, intellectual property in the form of knowledge transfer, or multiplier effects, which we'll get into a little bit in just a moment. Over the last several years, foreign direct investments within the Russian Federation have largely mirrored macroeconomic cycles. It's been relatively stable when you compare it to what the volatility of the global equity markets has looked like. Interestingly enough, the largest source of foreign direct investments within the Russian Federation is remittances of existing investments. More interestingly enough, they tend to flow within the Cyprus or the Netherlands, and I would assume that there's some form of tax advantage that's fueling that. So let's talk a little bit about what motivates equity investors. There is a view that the Russian Federation is an emerging market and a middle market, if you will, where there are the opportunity for increased returns relative to a larger Western market. At the same time, investors do understand that where there's greater return, there's also greater risk. And so the question really becomes, how are you able to weigh these two factors in evaluating any sort of capital infrastructure investment opportunity? Now, from a perspective here, because I've been asked to talk, what are Western capital advisors looking for? There's basically a process that tends to work when you're looking to shop around an investment on the global capital markets. The first part is to understand what kind of capital we're talking about. Are we talking about tens of millions, hundreds of millions? Are we talking about billions of dollars? That's going to have an impact on the types of investors that you will be targeting. The next step is to understand what's the nature or the structure of the deal that you're considering. Is it an infrastructure play? Is it a licensing arrangement? Are you going to be importing foreign capital in the form of equipment? Are you going to be developing local capital? And then how do you actually go about understanding how to articulate what the value proposition is and coming up with terms? That then gets to the structure of the investment. Again, whether this is going to be a cash flow, joint venture, and then obviously what the valuation looks like. The most important thing, though, that I'll leave you on this slide is that a Western capital provider, the first thing they're looking to understand is the last step of the process, which is how they exit. What's the final return going to look like? Westerners are not afraid of 5, 10, 20-year capital horizons. That doesn't concern them. But what you do want to understand is what does the path to the exit look like and what's the financial return that they would be dealing with. Another thing that I would like to share is the view that Westerners tend to have with respect to how the due diligence is performed on the investments in question. Commercial due diligence is a term of art when it comes to capital advisory. There's no capital out there who's not going to be looking for not only a financial understanding of what the opportunity is all about, but also the strategic understanding. Is this something that fits with a larger political plan within the region? And what I say is when I say political plan, I'm referring to job creation, I'm referring to investments in educational infrastructure, I'm talking about whether the regional plan is aligned to the federal plan, and then obviously the operational components of the investment as well. Do you have the right people to be able to make the investment successful? Do you have the right mix of resources that are going to be required to actually run the venture? Increasingly, capital is easy to come by on global capital markets. What investors are looking to understand are what are all the other non-cash or non-capital related assets that you can bring to bear, whether it's smart people, a great geography, a compelling idea, or any of the other things that we've heard so many other speakers discuss today. What concerns investors, and again, this is coming from a little bit of a Western perspective, I don't know, there's probably a mix of stereotypes as well as reality that's all baked into this slide, but I have been asked to speak from a very candid view. And there is a view in the West that sometimes there can be a big black hole when doing business in the East. I think everyone in the room is aware of the factors that are on the slide, just running through because I just remembered we're doing translations. There is a view that the level of corruption that exists, or the perceived level of corruption that exists within the Russian Federation. There's a concern over the lack of transparency, how business is actually done. Now, for these first two parts, I'd say that, at least from my experience over the last 5 years coming in and out of the Russian Federation, this is probably more perception than reality. There's a different business environment here, and that business environment is not fully appreciated, nor is it fully documented in the West, and I think that's what causes misperceptions rather than reality. But these are the points that a Western capital advisor is going to want to understand in any course of conversation. Legal barriers. It is sometimes difficult to do business in Russia. Me, as a US passport holder, it takes me about 3 to 5 weeks to get a visa to come here. Once I'm here, I have to register my visa with the local police department or post office, and that's, frankly, that doesn't make me feel very welcome. And that's me who's motivated to come here and who does feel welcome here. So you can imagine that if you're trying to attract a first-time investor into the region, this can be a bit off-putting. There's a perception over the lack of rule of law. There is a Byzantine hodgepodge of laws that exist in different organizations that manage those laws, and insight into how those actually operate is crucial if you're looking to do a deal, especially across borders. The perception of political interference, lack of infrastructure, not only fixed infrastructure in the forms of roads or airports, but also human capital. It is actually very strange to a lot of Westerners the fact that there's no major highway that connects, for example, St. Petersburg and Moscow, in the same way that a lot of Western countries would have huge roads and lots of mass transit, whether through train or by car or by plane, that connects their big cities. Lack of human
1
capital
minute, please.
and other difficulties as well. In closing, though, this is not meant to scare anyone. This is not meant to say you've got problems. This is simply meant to say there are huge opportunities for investments within the Russian Federation. There's huge opportunities to fuel the tourism industry. And what I've tried to do here today in the short time that I've had is to give you all a glimpse as to how you can seize those opportunities, understanding what the mentality, what the view, what the concerns of a Western capital provider might be as you're shopping around international projects. Thank you very much for your time.